So this book is small, but it's very small words, and there's 64 pages. I need to give this book to my friend back at least by Sunday. I can give myself. I've been having it so long. Oh, sorry. I'm on page 29. Black Reconstruction and Deconstruction. The beginning of the U.S. Civil War in 1861 posed various problems for the Northern Union ruling class. So the Northern Union, they didn't want slavery no more. Not only was the war for the preservation of an expanding continental empire, but it also opened up a second front, that of a liberation struggle by enslaved African peoples with a population of 4 million. The rising of these Africans in the South proved crucial in the defeat of the Confederacy. So what did it say? It's crazy because when that war started, people who were enslaved by, well, this is a question too, like, were the African slaves who were they still kept like enslaved during the whole Civil War, and then like, I guess when the North was considered the victor, then they let them free, or were they able to like run away and join the North? You know what I mean? That's a question that just kind of curious. With a population of 4 million, the rising of the Africans in the South proved crucial in the defeat of the Confederacy see, that's what I'm saying. So there was a lot of African slaves that were already in enemy territory, because when the Civil War started, it was like, you know, they made the Africans feel like they were fighting for them, you know? Because it proved crucial in the defeat of the Confederacy. By the tens of thousands, African slaves escaped from the slavers and enlisted in the Union forces. This massive withdrawal of slave labor hit the Southern economy hard, and the Northern forces were bolstered by the thousands. It's kind of like they set up the soldiers of the South, because, like, I mean, the quote unquote the sovereignty, the kings, the bourgeois, they weren't fighting, you know. They kind of set up their, because, you know, like they said, the South became weak and the North became strong. Towards the end of the war in 1865, those Africans who did not escape began a large-scale strike following the defeat of the Confederacy. They claimed the lands that they had labored on and began arming themselves, not only against the Southern planters, but also against the Union Army, against the North. So when the North came through, they were still like, fuck you, we ain't giving you nothing. Widespread concerns about this dangerous position of Africans in the South led to Black Reconstruction. So they were considered a dangerous position for there to be Africans in the South. Led to the Black Reconstruction. Africans were promised democracy, human rights, self-government, and popular ownership of the land. In reality, it was a strategy for returning Euro-American dominance involving. So in reality, it was a strategy for returning Euro-American dominance involving, in quotes, 1, the military repression of the most organized and militant African communities. The military repression of the most organized militant African communities. Also, for the military to always step in whenever there was a organized or militant African community. 2, pacifying the African peoples by neocolonialism, using elements of the African petit bourgeois to lead their people into embracing U.S. citizenship as the answer to all problems. Instead of nationhood and liberation, the neo-colonial agents told the masses that their democratic demands could be met by following the northern settler capitalists. So they would use people that were like them to lead their people into embracing the U.S. So pacifying the African peoples by neo-colonialism. Yeah, it's kind of like colonizing your own people. That's what neo-colonialism means. Following this strategy, Union Army forces attacked African communities who were occupying land, forcing tens of thousands off collectively held land and arresting the leaders, in quotes. African troops who had fought in the Union Army were quickly disarmed and dispersed or sent to fight as colonial troops in the ongoing Indian Wars. Damn, so even during the Civil War, there was still ongoing Indian Wars. And so the African troops, because, you know, like in the South, when the South, you know, lost, the southern slaves were like, they stopped working. Like, it's the end of the war. The North won. The rule was that we would be free. So they stopped wanting to work, and they ended up, they went to war. So they seen the violence. They might have had family members who survived, So they were like, no, they're more courageous slaves, you could say now. And so now they were turning on the South, but then the Northern were like, what's up, man? It's kind of like the Heart of Darkness when they send that guy in to colonize the place, but he ends up like using them for him to live like a king. It's a great book, but it's kind of like, what the North was asking the freed slaves of the South when they were trying to, like, we were fighting for you, but it wasn't for your land, it was for the whole America, just to be free, like the chains to be released, but that's just your physical state, I guess. So and now the Northern Africans, they started becoming scared of them because oh shit, they're gonna turn on us because of what we're doing to their African brothers in the South. So they disarmed them. So and some of them were actually used as soldiers to help, the North, or help the Union, or the present settlers to go fight the Indian wars. White supremacist terrorist organizations formed, one of the most infamous, but not the only, being the Ku Klux Klan. Now this is kind of like when gangs form. Under the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Africans became U.S. citizens, including the right to vote. Through the neo-colonialist strategy of Reconstruction, Africans were able to push through reforms including integrated juries, protective labor reforms, divorce and property rights for women, and an involvement in local government. Protective labor reforms, so not to be too much of like beaten up, you could go home pretty much. Divorce and property rights for women, maybe the bourgeois wanted to have sex with them, and an involvement in local government. However, even these small reforms were too much for Southern whites. Reconstruction was vigorously resisted not only by former slaves and planters, but also by poor whites who flocked to organizations such as the KKK. So, however, even these small reforms were too much for Southern whites. Like, nah, that's too much for the black man. Reconstruction was vigorously resisted not only by former slaves and planters, so Reconstruction was vigorous, so the black people were resisted, but also by poor whites who flocked to organizations such as the KKK. And white caps. I'm confused right there why they brought up the poor whites who were wanting to join the KKK. Wouldn't they want the blacks to be reconstructed? Because they said not only by why would former slaves and planters fight against Reconstruction? No, this whole thing is kind of backwards, right? Even reading it, it's so confusing. Poor whites who flocked to organizations such as the KKK, White Caps, White Cross, and the White League. Thousands of Africans were killed during state elections as the white supremacist groups conducted terrorist campaigns aimed at countering the gains of Reconstruction and preserving white supremacy. In quotes, in 1876 through 77, 1 year, the final accommodation between Northern capital and the Southern planters was reached in the Hayes-Tilden deal. The South promised to accept the dominance of the Northern bourgeois over the entire empire, and to permit the Republican candidate Ruther B. Hayes to succeed Grant in the U.S. presidency. In return, the Northern bourgeois agreed to let the planters have regional hegemony over the South and to withdraw the last of the occupying Union troops so that the Klan could take care of the Africans as they wished. While the guarded remnants of Reconstruction held out here and there for some years, African congressmen were elected from the South until 1895. The critical year of 1877 marked their conclusive defeat. Not insignificantly, during this same period, Northern working-class whites were engaged in a vicious class struggle for an 8-hour workday, even as Africans were under attack by the KKK and other racist organizations. And at the same time, little notice was made of the military extermination campaigns being carried out against Native peoples. During the war, many First Nations attempted to remain neutral in the South, although some promises by the Confederacy for land stimulated some First Nations to side with the South. But neutrality is not the same as passive. Native peoples continued their own resistance to colonization. From 1861 through 63, the Apaches, led by Cochise and Mongas, Colorado, fought occupation forces as a resistance that would continue until 1886 when Geronimo was captured. The Santee also engaged the U.S. military from 1862 to 63, led by Little Crow. In 1863 through 64, this war would shift to North Dakota under the Teton, T-E-T-O-N. In 1863, the Western Shoshone fought settlers and attacked military patrols and supply routes in Utah and Idaho. That same year, the Navajo rebelled in New Mexico and Arizona. With the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, settlement of the West increased rapidly. The militarization from the Civil War and the ability to supply and facilitate large-scale military operations opened up the final period in the Indian Wars. In the post-Civil War period, the genocidal process of colonization was to enter a new phase, even at the price of thousands of the U.S. troops dead and wounded, and each dead Indian coming at the price of $1 million. By 1885, the last great herd of buffalo, also we said, and each Indian coming at the price, so they're saying that the Indians filed a lawsuit. So talking about like later on in life when the natives would like be suing the U.S. government, and the U.S. did give them money and land, you know. By 1885, the largest great herd of buffalo will be slaughtered by Euro-American hunters. So why would they slaughter them so much? Would they eat the why? By 1885, the last great herd of buffalo would be slaughtered by Euro-American hunters. This also forming a part of the counterinsurgency strategy of depriving the Plains Indians of their primary food source. Five years later, 350 Lakotas would be massacred at Chankpe-Opi-Wakbala, the creek called Wounded Knee. 350 Lakotas will be massacred. That was the end of that one. Black Reconstruction and Deconstruction.